It feels like we needed to really punch the audiences in the faces and say, this is not the Marvel maybe that you've seen recently, but it is also the Marvel that you're used to in a lot of different ways.
You guys appeared in a bunch of different cameos along the way in the MCU, but what was it in talking with some of the Marvel execs that made you guys go, let's get the band back together. Let's get the Daredevil guys going for another series?
They called us in the middle of COVID and talked to us about coming back for a few things and popping up here and there, as you say, She-Hulk and Spider-Man and Hawkeye and Echo and stuff like that. Everything they do over there at Marvel Studios is so cool. We're such a big fan of the stuff that they do, and really just letting them go to work and think about what makes sense for the character and coming up with a plan is really their job. What was particularly cool about this circumstance is we actually tried something a bit different. Didn't quite work out in the same way that we thought it would, and Marvel pivoted, and when we came back from the strikes, we rewrote some stuff. Not we personally, but stuff was rewritten. There was a change of course in terms of direction. And where we've ended up, I think, feels much more in keeping with where we want to be and the kind of show that we are and the identity of the show.
And what was it about that pivot from like a visual perspective, the stamp they wanted to put on it, and a narrative arc perspective, that excited the two of you when you did come back to work?
Well, one of the things we always wanted was to be attached to the old show. That was a big deal for us. We wanted it to be, they could call it whatever they wanted to call it, but we wanted it to have feelings of a fourth season, even though it was the first for Born Again. We got that accomplished, and it was a lot of work, but we got it. It wasn't just hard work from Charlie and I, it was hard work from everybody on the team to make that happen. Again, backed up by the studios. I think that the idea was to put these characters in a place that worked best, which was in a darker scenario. This story plays better than any other scenario in that world, in that darker world. Within that, we wanted complex writing, and we wanted all the action and the way the action is portrayed. I mean, we pretty much got everything we needed at the end.
I know you've talked a little bit about how Marvel's overhauled its development strategy. Can you tell me a little bit about how Daredevil Born Again kind of fits into what you want to do moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, Daredevil Born Again represents the new strategy. It's a show that hopefully, knock on wood, can go on for many seasons and be released annually and, feel like a television show that you can look forward to. And when there's a new season, it feels like an event.
I know every project in the Marvel universe is incredibly unique, but what stood out to the both of you about how Marvel was approaching this iteration of Daredevil?
I think it was about having the feel and the intensity of the old show and bringing it into now, bringing it into 7 years later, bringing it into this world with these characters that have aged a little bit, maybe gotten a little older, maybe a little wiser. We're not 100% sure. So the challenge was to really maximize everything that we as fans loved about the previous show and then move it forward in a manner that was, surprising and fun and delivered.
Brad's been talking a lot about kind of a new direction forward for Marvel, and that first 15 minutes of the show kind of knocked me off my chair, frankly, with what you guys set up kind of going forward for not only this series, but hopefully the MCU in the future. Could you tell me a little bit about kind of nailing that intro to this show and those first couple scenes and what you wanted to put your stamp on both visually and narratively?
So that opening, I probably pitched when we first met. And the idea of taking through action a journey, like through a door, to a place, to another place, that told the story that both of what has happened in the past and what we wanted to tell. I think that was signature. And I think that I don't know their plans for other shows in the MCU, but in this corner of the world that is Hell's Kitchen, that gritty street level stuff, I think that's a calling card saying that here's what it looks like, here's what it feels like.
And I love that they gave us the leeway to just go for it and try. Like, Brad was very encouraging of being like, you want to go do the thing, just go do the thing, because it feels like we needed to really punch the audiences in the faces and say, this is not the Marvel maybe that you've seen recently, but it is also the Marvel that you're used to in a lot of different ways.
It's the Marvel you came to as a teenager to the comics.
Yeah.
The comics were always really deeply psychological. The comics always had a real kind of like grit to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we kind of just went for it. So who knows what's going to happen, but I feel like it's opened us, hopefully will open up some doors.
You
And
broke a
Sana
lot of
and
doors.
Brad-
We broke a lot of doors.
broke a lot of doors. And it should be said that Sana and Brad and Lou and Kevin and everybody at Marvel were beyond supportive of taking this in a rambunctious direction.
Rambunctious, yeah.
You've both got to work on a bunch of different Marvel series at this point. With the gift of hindsight, what would you go back and tell yourself on day one now that you've been through this process a bunch of different times?
You know what? It's gonna be fine, and get some sleep.
I would say enjoy it more
Yeah.
and enjoy these moments more
Yeah.
because they're fleeting and they really are a lot of fun. It's hard work and we beat the crap out of ourselves, but I would tell my past self to enjoy it a little more.
The magic of seeing an idea that we talk about that comes together and all these people touch it, and then it comes together in a moment when you're sitting on set and you're like, yes!
Yeah.
Like that is why we do it.
And to remember that during the tough times.
Yes, absolutely.
Dario, most of your career has been like in this action sandbox, which has been really cool to see. What's the key for you to making a compelling action film or show?
Story and humanity. I mean, the idea that a good action sequence always has a story. You know, the ones that we grew up loving, you're like, oh, like Die Hard. You know, when he gets glass in his feet, like that. There's the story of the extra obstacle you don't expect. And then humanity. Like breaking bones just for breaking bones' sake. Sure, it's fun. I've done it. Throwing people off buildings. Fun, you know, but in the end, it has to have stakes for a point of view character. You have to be on the shoulder of somebody who's in that fight and feel that fight.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always constantly thinking about what's taking you into the conflict, where's the fun in the conflict, and at the end of it, what's the, for lack of a better word, lesson learned or change that's happened.
So every project in this universe is pretty unique, especially for you guys. But what stood out to you about the way Marvel executives were talking about Daredevil and bringing this show back?
Ourselves and also everyone involved, they just really, really love the original Netflix show. You know, there's a lot of reverence for it. And so I think one of the big aims was, and what they were talking to us about and what we wouldn't have done it otherwise, is we wanted to feel like that show, even if it's going on a pretty new path. You've seen it, right? Yep. You know, it's going on a pretty new path. We wanted it to just kind of still like make us feel like we did when we pressed play on that show, where, you know, we know that the stakes are extremely human. You know, they bleed like we bleed, and especially also like a horrific, brutal act of violence. A couple of them, you know, kind of define the show, and so that was the main conversation. There was a desire to kind of like feel New York a little bit more, you know, to just make sure that it really feels ground level. That's where the kind of fake documentary within the show comes in, and serialize it a bit more, and they really wanted those signature oneers, the one take fight scenes, you know.
And what were kind of like those cultural touch points from like other films and shows where you like kind of got that? Because I had like, as I was walking here, like a little Sam Raimi maybe in my head. Like what were you guys looking at that kind of inspired that perspective, which kind of comes into that second episode as well?
There's definitely a shot that's not in the oneer, but it's right around it that we were looking at something like Midsommar for. We stole a lot of inspiration from our DP Isaac Bauman on Loki 2 in terms of how those sorts of things feel.
The Netflix series itself, the Prison Oneer, I think that the Prison Oneer remains one of the gold standards of oneers of all time. It's like up there with the Children of Men Oneer. Something we learned from watching that oneer and lots of other stuff from the Netflix show. This comes up a lot, but that seeing these guys fighting become so fatigued, and you just see that despite all of their martial arts, they're just so human. And that there's something so powerful about when you do see them just it's in that exhausted breath and just taking a second to lean against a wall before getting back into it. That was something we learned a lot from the prior show from.
You guys hope to kind of play in the more supernatural elements of the Daredevil universe if you get to kind of go forward with telling this story?
We'll go where the story tells us to go, but personally, I really like when it stays ground level. I really like when one character bleeds, you know, they bleed the way that we bleed. It's really nice when it feels like you can crank the stakes because nobody heals. People don't, you know, they can't do things that other humans can't do. Of course, Daredevil does have some powers, but they're not supernatural. They are from training, and so we like it that way. However, if the story tells us to go there, we're very comfortable in that space, right? I mean, that's from our other Marvel work, but also from our independent film work. There's always a supernatural aspect to it. But if we did it, we'd want to do it right. We'd want to make it feel real.
I want to talk a little bit about those first 15 minutes, obviously without spoilers. Explosive, harkens back to some of the action you just talked about in the previous iteration of Daredevil. Could you tell me a little bit about how you guys were kind of conceiving that and kind of what you wanted to communicate to the audience, not only visually, but from a storytelling perspective?
It's a moment in Matt's life where he is going to break his moral code in such a significant way that he is going to, hang up the suit for a period of time. So we knew that this had to be a final sequence for a chapter in Daredevil's existence. And because it's a final sequence, it needed to feel like a big finale. Now, it's an exciting action sequence, that's for sure. And hopefully it can be held up, at the same level as some of the great Wonder action sequences from the original show. But it's also a scene that's filled with a lot of pain and anguish. And something that Dario and the creative team have done behind the scenes is make sure that in Daredevil Born Again, there's no arbitrary violence. Violence comes at a cost and is always there because of it has to push the character forward.
With these first 2 episodes, it really has like kind of that political thriller feel to it. Could you tell me a little bit about kind of making sure that this feels of the moment, but also subvert the audience's expectations?
We're just following the characters. And time has passed for these 2 men. They both are trying to rewrite their history. Matt is trying to be a lawyer and uphold maybe the ideals of Foggy Nelson. Wilson Fisk is trying to leave a legacy behind and actually do what he thinks is right for New York, which is a place he has true love for. Unfortunately, they wield violence as currency, and pressure is going to come to bear, and they're going to explode.